Good evening, White Witch 110 here. Those of you that have been looking forward to a story, I have the beginnings of one for you this evening. It is called Lover's Walk. The summer sun had set. A cool breeze flowed through the trees. It was welcomed. The pathway had been in ruins for many a decade. Attempts to restore it were met with excuses. You couldn't blame the government in a way. The cost and the disruption to the landscape would be too much. The government instead spent money to restore the once lush shrubs and trees. During a time of indecision, rumors grew of ghostly figures roaming the escarpment day and night. Shadows played havoc with those easily frightened. Employees of the museum were accustomed to the stories that ebbed and flowed depending on the time of year. The validity of such stories was questionable. Diana had never been one for fanciful tales of women in long flowing gowns descending a phantom staircase. Stories of society's downtrodden, peering from behind trees even in death. Millions of tourists to the museum were unaware of altered history beside them. Diana cultivated an interest in the walkway, now long forgotten. In her day and age, only a handful knew of Lover's Walk. Where the name came from, no one seems to know, but it was accepted in 1873 and remains to this day. Diana had a wealth of information stored in her head. She would rattle it off to any person willing to listen. She knew the architect, Thomas Seton Scott. She knew the original user of the pathway were the indigenous people. In 1875, undesirables were a pitfall. 1930s became the decline of Lover's Walk. Diana would tell guests about the boy in 1933 who fell 50 feet to only suffer a broken thigh bone. In 1937, a man broke his back, losing his balance sitting on a guardrail. In 1960, a drunken painter fell to his death. With such history, it's no wonder the hillside was haunted. It was not surprising to have witness to the paranormal. The city was surrounded by water, a perfect conductor. Diana would spend an hour after work decompressing by the canal. She watched the strength of the dark, cold water rushing through the original wooden canal gates, allowing the level to drop for boaters. The violent churning caused the water to appear white, with offshoot of droplets. She would hear whispers in the wind constantly. Not a single word was clearly pronounced. She always shrugged it off and continued to sit by the water. When it felt right, Diana made her way home with a smile, a perfect ending to a day. Night was upon the canal once more. There were more than whispers in the wind now. There was a faint chant to the atmosphere. They were gathering. What their purpose was, no one could tell. Gray storm clouds assembled above the city streets. It was creeping ever closer. Alley cats took shelter under porches and in garages. The day's discarded trash scattered in no particular direction. Lightning flashed across the sky and the ground shook. People sat up in their beds, fearful of what the weather was to bring. Windows rattled and unlocked gates slammed shut repeatedly. It was a night to hunker inside the covers, as the temperature had dropped. Diana slept soundly after the first clap of thunder. This weather, strangely enough, brought her comfort. The pitch of the rain against her roof brought pleasant memories of the past, and her eyes closed once again. The wind blew colder and the rain harder. The shadows moved among the foliage, creeping with malintent. Using energy from the atmosphere, they crushed flowers and destroyed young saplings. "They'll never know it was us," one old, disgruntled spirit proclaimed with a sickening smile. Another pointed towards the museum, a fiendish look upon his face. The others turned and nodded in agreement. But how to get in? Could they get in? None had ever tried. Were they allowed to leave the cover of the escarpment? They would soon find out. Old Disgruntled pushed his way past those eager to leave. Reaching the tree line, he hesitated. One simple footstep would tell his future. It couldn't be worse than what it was now. He held his breath, though there was no need to. His transparent foot moved slowly forward. Carefully it came down. He paused. Nothing happened. He felt no change. He turned to his gang of hoodlums. None stepped forward. They awaited his fate. His second foot was poised, ready to go, when a loud crack came from above. The sound was deafening in the stillness of the night. One large branch fell inches from his ghostly being. "That was close," he responded. "What difference would it make? We're already dead," exclaimed a spirit from the rear. Disgruntled followed through and found himself breathing in clean air. "Come on," he shouted back. "The air is clean." "Don't you mean the coast is clear?" another suggested. "No, stupid, the air," he responded, taking a deep breath. The group cautiously maneuvered their way towards the asphalt. The feeling was strange beneath their feet. It had been decades since any one of them had felt this. Smiles, however, materialized on each face. It was a freedom they never expected. "We can go wherever we want," a spirit in overalls said. "No, you don't know how far we can go. We'll take this a step at a time," Disgruntled responded. One behind the other they followed. There was great relief when the tall front door was reached. "What now? We don't have a key," Overalls observed. In unison they glared. "We don't need a key, you idiot," Disgruntled shouted. "We're ghosts. We don't need a key." There was an awkward silence. None of them had ventured out of the trees before. Disgruntled placed his transparent hand on the stone wall of the commissariat. His hand disappeared within it. He was shocked, and it showed on his face. He stretched further into the building until his entire arm had disappeared. Feeling rather smart, Disgruntled took one large step, and he was gone. The others stood in wonder. He was inside the building, or had he gone to another realm? The faintest voice came through the decades-old stone. It resembled an old recording. "Come through, I'm okay, don't be afraid," the voice invited. Two by two they disappeared within the wall. The wonderment on their faces upon reaching the other side was priceless. It had been so many years since they had felt the warmth of a room like this. Some wondered how they were feeling it at all, seeing their condition. "What should we take?" one of the scruffy men inquired. "Nothing, you fool," Disgruntled exclaimed, frustrated. "We can only go through the wall. How dense are you?" Disgruntled looked around the room. He was amused by the tiny trinkets labeled with the museum's name. Overalls picked up a book and leafed through the photos. "Didn't think I could do this," he continued, looking. "Ned, is this you?" He held up a page. Disgruntled squinted to focus. Damn, that is me. He grabbed the book from Overall's hand. He couldn't help but smile. That was before the bad times. His face softened. Ned remembered those days. They were fond memories he had buried deep inside. Peering up above his photo, he noticed the others. That was long ago, boys. I was a different person when I died. What would you lose to be that person again? Overalls asked. Respect. None of you would respect the person I was. I'm sure we would. Being honest, we're afraid of you. Ned lowered his head. He knew the words spoken were true. It was the only way I wouldn't be eaten alive in my situation. He stepped forward to take a ghostly hand offered. My name is Owen, said Overalls. Good to know you, Ned said with a smile. The others had made their way to the upper floors. They delighted in turning lights off and on, which only brought attention to the building. They had been playing around with displays, having a grand old time. Ned and Owen had been sharing stories when they heard voices. Ned held up his hand. We'd better get out of here. Why, they can't see us, remember? Owen reminded him. The other spirits descended through the floor to the gift shop. There's a car outside and people. Wonder why they're here. We haven't set off any alarms. A spirit by the name of Dean spoke up. Well, it could have been the lights. What lights? Ned inquired. We were playing with the lights, Dean admitted. Why the hell would you do something so stupid? There was no answer. At that moment, they heard the key in the lock. The knob turned, the door opened, sending a rush of cold air into the room. The police made their way floor to floor in search for bandits. They declared the building empty and no sign of forced entry. The mystery was the alarm had never been triggered. The door relocked, off they went. Without a word, the ghost gang went back to the escarpment. Diana was not so anxious to get to work that morning. It felt more like fall and not the beginning of summer. The atmosphere seemed unbalanced after the weather the previous night. Wrapped in a thick woolen sweater with the pattern of a moose, she set off to the museum. Entering the building, Diana hung her coat behind the counter. Everything looked in order, but the atmosphere was off, so she climbed the stairs. Her mouth fell open. She was not expecting the sight that greeted her. Leaflets covered the wooden floor. Diana explained it away by the air conditioning. She began gathering up the mess when she spotted a book. Placing what she had retrieved on a glass display case, she walked towards it. Her eyes met another sight that shocked her. Quickly, she took out her phone and called the lead docent. You need to get here. The place is a mess, Diana said, struggling for a breath. In that second of dialing, she thought, is the person still here? Her boss informed her of the call late last night. Everything appeared to be in place. We checked the entire building and no one was there. Doesn't make sense. I'll be there as quick as I can. There was panic in her voice. Jessie took photos on the 3rd floor. What had happened after they had left last night? On the escarpment, the spirits were full of excitement after the evening's adventure. Some were ready to explore the city with all its changes they had only been able to see from their vantage point. Ned had been concerned about the condition of the museum after the... Okay, I don't know what happened there, but I will continue. Okay, where was I? You half-baked dimwits, paranormal investigators, people who look for ghosts. If they want us gone, we're gone. We won't be here or anywhere else on this planet, Ned continued. We would have to be in the museum for that to happen, the grimy face spoke up. I, for one, didn't want this. Ned's eyes panned the group. He knew who instigated the vandalism. It was you, Peter. I know the smug look, he said, loathing the sight of him. It was just some fun. Tell me you never did that, Peter replied with a large ego. I'd love nothing better than to belt you down more than a few pegs. The thrashing of his words were complete. Ned wandered off, Dean close behind. What do we do? Dean asked quietly. Oops. Hang on, people. I am so sorry about this. And what do we do? Nothing. We stay clear of the museum. Ned answered, his head hung low. Dean heard the disappointment in his voice. Foolish tricks had truly ruined everything. He had looked forward to visiting again and taking long looks at the displays. There wasn't a chance of that happening now. That's all I have of this story for right now. I think I might know why this switched off. I had this problem once before, so I'll have to look into that and change it. But thank you for coming by. I hope you've enjoyed this. And until the next time, ciao for now.